Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
You can feel a bit isolated if something is happening in your company, but when you know that it's a common occurrence out there, you can look at it differently and look to find solutions potentially that other people have found, or at least start to look for yourself as to what could work for your organizations. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan and this is my friend and co-host Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
So here we are in the Big D again.
Okay, you still are going to keep
No,
singing.
I'm going to keep singing.
You are. I thought you might have forgot. I thought you'd forget.
I'm never going to forget.
Okay.
I'm going to sing it all.
Go for it.
And then when we're back in New York,
Soon.
I'm going to do a full-on Broadway performance.
Oh.
I'm really not, but I just think it's fun to say it.
Listeners, I'd hold her to it if I were you.
You know what? Speaking of performances, someone that we love so much, who is a podcaster, a leader of ours, like in terms of role model, I would say. I don't know her personally. I wish I did. But Brené Brown,
Yes.
big news just
news.
came out that her contract with Spotify has expired. And I just thought it would be interesting to talk about that right up here at the top, because I think it's good and it's bad. It's good because she's standing up.
Well, yeah. First of all, just a little background.
Yes, background.
Renee decided to start a podcast called Unlocking Us, and she decided to do it during COVID.
Yes.
And she actually did, and she paused it for a while, but then she ended up going forward with it, like literally recording it out of her closet. And so then it became wildly successful. And in the midst of that, I can't remember exactly when it happened, and maybe Dare to Lead, which was her second podcast that was more focused on leadership, which actually gave us a lot of inspiration. Is she signed a deal, an exclusive deal with Spotify, which I remember being pissed off because at the time I was listening through my
Apple
podcast.
Music.
I actually was with Stitcher. I'd gone from Apple Music. I had kind of matured in my podcast listening.
I want to do what's cool.
Well, I liked Stitcher because I could organize it. My episodes and save things and earmark things. Anyway, it was just a lot more user-friendly than just the plain old Apple, and maybe that's changed since then. However, she signed an exclusive deal with Spotify, and then quickly both of her podcasts ended up becoming just major
Through the moon
money makers for Spotify, and very successful. And they still are out there, very, very good sources of content for leaders. The Unlocking Us is a lot more broader around the content, but it's just such rich interviews with Brené and just the vulnerability, and just there's such great content there. And then she hit a crossroads because Spotify, she started to have almost like a value contradiction with some of the decisions they were making as a platform.
Correct.
And she went on hiatus.
Yes.
She pulled
Was that
her
last
episodes.
year?
It was last year.
Yeah.
But she
Or 2021? I feel like it's been a minute.
Maybe it has, but I don't remember. It doesn't really matter.
No.
That being said, that's when the friction started.
Yes.
And I think we talked about that on a
think we
previous episode, but because we talked about the self-smarter aspect of her making the decision to pause her podcast while she worked with the executives of Spotify to understand more about their policies. And again, you can Google it, just Brené and Spotify, whatever, and find out more. But yeah, then the contract renegotiation came up, and they've split ways. So she's done podcasting for a while.
I guess bad news if you're a Spotify junkie and that's where you listen to everything.
Yes,
There's no exclusivity there anymore. Good news, she's going to be everywhere. She's on hiatus right now from what we understand.
Spotify still exclusively produces other podcasts, but not for Brené Brown.
Not for Brené.
Correct.
Yeah,
so that's good news for listeners who don't
she's not
listen.
going anywhere.
Right.
And from what we read, Unlocking Us and Dare to Lead are both still going to remain on Spotify.
Correct.
She's just now going to be on Apple Music and any other place where you might listen to podcasts.
Which I just think it's interesting reading
smarter.
Yes, exactly. It's just interesting though reading about that particular, like, I can't tell if she's going to continue to podcast or not. It doesn't sound like she is.
I know.
But maybe she's just going to take a break and use this as an opportunity. But it's just, I think it's a little bit fascinating to think about how Spotify is almost can really manipulate some of this content. Not manipulate the content, but manipulate from the standpoint of you can only listen to these particular, whether it's celebrities or these thought leaders here on Spotify. And I really hadn't thought about it being those type of contracts, really.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking about it a little bit more, and it's, I don't know, for me, it's a little icky.
Yeah.
I should be able to listen to a podcast wherever I want.
True.
But I'm still dedicated to Spotify.
You like Spotify?
Yeah, I can't deny that. But yeah, interesting. It looks, I mean, I think about that, and I think that's a brave move.
It is a brave.
She was consistently, her podcasts were in the top 10.
Yes.
Of all listens in Spotify.
And across all audiences, I mean, because of what she's standing up for, which I don't want to get into that because it's
somewhat political.
It's somewhat political, yes. And I want to run for the hills when someone brings up politics. But I started thinking, like, the way that she's standing up for her values, is that a sacrifice? Is losing the contract or killing the contract with Spotify a sacrifice?
Yes, but she'd be going against everything she preaches if she didn't do it.
Correct.
And so I think
and teaches to us.
Teaches, yeah. I think it's a stand that really shows her walking the walk. Yeah. And talking that she doesn't talk about these are the things that you should do as a leader. These are the things you should do as you fill in the blank. When it comes to values, you can't discard them when it becomes inconvenient.
It's not politics.
That's right. So, yeah, it's just an interesting, I think for our listeners, knowing what we talk about on here and for our regular listeners, it's an interesting study to kind of see that unfold. But what I love about it, to your point, is that it's a beautiful example of someone standing up for their values and not allowing this success in this particular example to cloud what they believe in. So I have to applaud her.
I do too. And for those of you who study the Enneagram like us, she's a 1 on the Enneagram. And that is one of their traits, is this notion of justice, where justice is due and served, and it must be just. So she's doing what she believes is right and standing by that. So that's, in terms of the Enneagram, it's playing out in this scenario very well for her.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're going to talk about trends for leaders to watch in 2023 today. But first, I wanted to ask you, because we love trends. We're all, as marketers, we can't help it.
We can't help it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what's coming? What can we be thinking about? What should we be doing? So I just started thinking of something fun. Are you seeing any trends in New York? Because here's the deal.
Okay, tell me
here's
the deal.
Trends start in 3 places: Milan, Paris, and New York City.
Per Megan, or is that a known? Is that a known fact?
Am I wrong?
I've never heard that, but I trust you.
You've never heard that?
Well, fashion. It seems like that works for fashion.
A lot of it. Yeah, and food. Come on,
and food. Yeah, I can see that.
The art.
That's fair.
Okay, so I was just wondering if you've noticed any trends walking about town, or
well, funny that you mentioned walking about town, because as you know, I walk a lot in New York City.
How much do you walk exactly? Let's just tell everybody how much you walk. I know how much you walk. Everybody here knows how much you walk.
I mean, I don't know. It's good. I do.
How many miles do you know? Is it marathon level?
No, not in a day.
13 miles?
No.
Is that too many?
I've done that plenty of times.
I know.
Plenty of times. But
she's marathoning it, y'all. In her walking shoes.
Minimum, I try to get in 3 to 5. But when it's really pretty outside, or if I have a lot going on, I can easily put in 10 miles and I don't even realize it.
God, that's great.
I don't even realize it. So
you're anyway, out there.
I'm out there.
What are you seeing?
And what I want to say about that, because every time I mention New York on an episode, I feel like we're getting calls and we're getting input from people that are worried about me and being in New York City. So just real quick before I talk about a few things I've noticed, I do want to put a disclaimer. If you are watching any type of media or reading any type of media that's talking about how New York is literally going up in flames.
Like the biggest shit show on the planet.
Yes. I love that word, shit show. Anyway, it's not, I haven't seen it. Yeah. Now, New York is a city where, of course, there is some crime and there's some dastardly things going on, but I will be honest with you, what I am hearing is being portrayed, I have not seen.
No.
And I'm cautious. And my daughter lives there.
Yes.
So, I mean, her dad and I, Drew and I would not feel good about that. And she's been there for 4 years before I got there. And so, yeah, I just want y'all to know that it's okay to come to New York. But if you're worried about it and you want to go there, give me a call. Yeah. I'll give you some tips on.
She can take some pictures and show you. This is current status. I don't know what you're seeing.
Exactly. Anyway,
yeah.
So the trend is New York is not on fire or going to hell in a handbasket. That is the trend that is being told is not the case that I have seen. Other trends, I will say the biggest trend that I have noticed is how expensive, prices on normal things. Which I tend to not pay attention to everyday things in terms of pricing. Like I'm in a position to where if I buy a cup of coffee or a tea somewhere, I'm really not paying attention to what it costs. Yeah. Bigger things, of course I am, because I'm a sensible person in that way. That doesn't mean I don't buy the expensive stuff. But that being said, I am noticing in New York, prices are on things that I buy in other cities on a regular basis. And I notice it because a lot of things I'm buying on an app. So there's a particular coffee place that you probably have heard of. I'm not going to mention their names, but
they have a white cup
and a mermaid in their logo.
Okay.
Anyway, so there is roughly a 60-cent difference in the coffee that I order at that particular franchise in New York versus here in Dallas. I just find that to be drastic. I get 13 cents.
I don't know how that's even possible.
Well,
I need to get down to the logistics of that. Like, what is
and
that?
I guarantee if I ask, they're going to say it's because I choose oat milk. But
is it because you choose oat milk?
No, it's not. But oat milk can't cost.
Here, if you get oat milk,
I get oat milk Dallas, everywhere, or I don't get it.
But in New York, the oat milk is 60 cents more. Well, and that doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't.
Supply and demand. No,
it doesn't. I feel like it's a form of gouging.
Gouging.
But I will. It's not gouging, potentially. However, I know the labor costs more. I know the bricks and mortar costs more. I get the cost, but why is that for something that the coffee's the same, the milk's the same? There's nothing different in the cups are probably from the same place. So I get the labor. So I would be okay. I would understand 13 to 20 cents on a $3.50 plus drink. But anyway, I digress.
So the lesson is worry less about your safety, worry more about
the cost,
your money,
what you're going to spend when you get there. These are not really trends. I'm not really good at this stuff because I know what you're wanting from me is like, what are people wearing? It's really what you wanted to ask me.
I do want to know that, yes.
Well, I don't pay attention. I will say puffy coats right now.
Yeah, big time.
But I don't know that that's a trend.
Thank you for underlining that because I was ready for the puffy. Yes.
Yes, puffy coats, but you're a whole nother.
I wore one yesterday.
Thing. Oh, a vest?
I did. A puffy vest.
Well, I've been in style for a while.
I know you have. They actually said look, you have on a Danelle vest.
Oh, the team did?
Yes.
Okay, that's funny.
It is funny.
So yeah, I think, and foods. I see lots of different things with food going on. Lots of interesting fusion. So yeah, there's. And that's always a trend, I think, but it's still happening and that's fun to explore. And then literally in New York, and I've eaten there for 20 plus years, is very casual. And brunch is king.
Yes.
I will say that. So the Sunday and Saturday fun days are on fire in New York.
Hey,
well, those are just little things I've noticed, I guess.
So come,
but I'll try to pay a little bit more attention.
Go see Danelle in New York,
please.
Don't be afraid,
and come buy me a coffee. And you need to bring a couple extra cents.
Bring the oat milk money. Before we start with our trends, let's jump to this quick commercial. Happy New Year, Self Smarter listeners. We're so grateful that you're hanging with us each week and doing the work and focusing on your leadership growth. Because you're so amazing, we've decided to offer you a gift. We've got Self Smarter desk calendars for 2023 that we're happy to ship right to your door if you want. To get one of these nifty calendars, all you have to do is go to selfsmarterpodcast.com, fill out the form, and our team will send you one to keep you on track and motivated in 2023. If not, that's okay too. Okay, listeners, you know that Danelle and I are always listening to the heartbeat of what's going on in the wide world of leadership.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about sports. I got so excited for a minute.
No.
I love leadership too.
I don't know what's going on with sports, but you do.
Oh, yeah.
We did watch that game. Anyway,
Oh,
I know.
I'm sorry, Jesse.
But don't you think we're on top of the lead? I know. I'm sorry, Jesse. Don't you? We pay attention to leadership stuff. You especially.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we're always on top of it. So you like to share content with the company about leadership. You shared it with me and the leadership team for a long time, and now I'm into it and doing the same thing. So let's get into what we're seeing relative to trends for leaders to keep an eye on in 2023. So first and foremost, what we need to be doing is being prepared for deeper conversations about, quote unquote, the right work for me. Meaning you're leading someone, they're coming to you and they're saying, don't be surprised. Okay. This is on trend. This is trending. This is what the people are predicting based on studies and the economy, et cetera. This is how it's shaken out. The Great Resignation is being called the Great Reshuffle.
Okay.
Because people are making decisions about their life, which may involve changing a job within an organization, which may involve changing jobs altogether, organizations altogether, or may involve leaving the job force altogether. So I have this quick stat. So 4.4 million Americans quit their jobs in February of 2022. That was in a study that I'm going to put in the show notes. But what I want to say is that trend carried on throughout the rest of 2022. And you've got a stat later on, but I just wanted to make note, more than half of the workers who quit are switching their occupations or field of work rather than leaving the labor force altogether. So our advice in terms of trends is be prepared for deeper conversations about the right work for me.
So that's trend number one.
That's trend number one.
Okay, is be prepared for deeper conversations.
Which I have to say, vulnerably here, I'm having.
Yeah. Absolutely. And kicking off, starting into looking at trends, I think something that we need to be conscious of as leaders is that something can be happening within your organization and you can think it's an isolated instance, potentially within your organization, or it only is happening there. And so I think it's important, and what we want to bring to you is things that are happening on a macro basis so that you feel less isolated about what you may be experiencing within your organization. That's why we want to talk about trends. The other thing is, even if this is not happening, we want you to be aware that this is potentially how, the workforce in general, things that are happening, and that could be for a lot of different reasons, and we're going to touch on some of those. But that's why trends are important, because it makes us understand that potentially is what is happening within our organization is not unique. So yay.
Yes.
And then, or yay meaning
you're not alone.
You're not alone, and there's information, and there's other people going through these things. And the other is things for you to be aware of that may not even be on your radar, that could be coming your way because of what's happening. So again, this is a macro look that you can take from this information and really apply it to your own leadership and organization or group that you're leading. So
right. Okay. And you're going to talk about number 2.
Yeah. So the second trend is to offer a psychologically safe environment. And economic downturns, which is what we are, I don't know if we're technically still in one. Drew would have to tell us that. But the fact is the economics are all over the place. And so when that happens, whether we're in one necessarily, coming out of one, it makes people feel very vulnerable. And one of the things that we learned in doing research is that people will hold back because they're fearful of speaking up because they don't want to lose their jobs for those that, are in a particular position. So that to me is, that is where psychological safety can be at risk when there's an environment where people are afraid to speak up. So it's our job to make sure that we're creating those spaces. And so we want to keep the courageous, bold thinkers that help us navigate, our work, we want to keep them encouraged to be speaking up. And I think that's when you're creating an environment with individuals who, we talk about it all the time. Here's one. We study the Enneagram, is that we celebrate differences in the way people relate to things and the way people think. Well, that's very important when you're trying to build an environment, because some people are going to be more comfortable and some people aren't with what is happening outside of the office. Again, using economics as an example, but there could be a number of of other examples.
Yes.
So, and I think when we're sharing ideas or we're inviting people to do that, what we also need to do is talk about talk about the rough times too. Like if your business is going through a bit of a dip, or if
be honest,
if there's a revenue crunch, if there's an operational difficulty, I can give some examples of things that we're potentially experiencing. Everyone knows that if you listen to this podcast on a regular basis, that, we cater, majority of our business is catering to agriculture because we support fresh food companies and with their marketing. Well, food is constantly being impacted by economics, by politics, because if you think about how your fresh food is grown. And so we see volatility with our clients, which affects our business. And if we don't talk openly about that, then people can get complacent and not worry about it at all. Meanwhile, it's impacting our business, or they can come up with their own narrative.
That's right.
And they will. And they will. And
that's cancerous.
And you know what? And we're all capable of that.
Yes.
Right? Of creating our own narrative when we're not being shared with.
That's right. So
one of the key ingredients to creating a psychologically safe environment is being open.
Yeah.
And talking to your people and creating an environment for there to be an exchange, not just a talking to. And I think that's really important. And quite honestly, when we suffered with what I considered when we had a toxic culture, that one of the things that we weren't doing well was creating forums for people to speak. I was sharing all the time.
Yes.
And what I was doing is I wasn't creating an environment for people to share back. Or when I did, there'd be silence.
Right.
And I called it lovingly crickets.
Right.
But I wasn't doing things to encourage it. And so that's something that we have learned.
That's right.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
I mean, I've got a tip for leaders. Like if you're noticing someone who, you've got one of two things. You're a leader and there's a group of people, you have them in a room. Let's say there's a brainstorm happening or a conversation happening about business financials. You've probably got the people who aren't afraid to ask the questions and are typical. The typical people who speak up.
Like 7s on the Enneagram.
Yes, basically. Or 8s.
Yeah.
And then you have other folks who typically take a back seat. Either way, if you start to notice the people who typically put their foot forward and their voice forward and those situations start to pull back, ask them why they're doing that.
Correct.
On the other hand, if you notice that the people who typically do not ask questions or offer, it's a good time to encourage them to start. You know they have good ideas, otherwise they wouldn't be on your team.
Right.
And maybe they're good individual workers and they don't like to speak up in team. They don't. But now is a good time to encourage them to stretch beyond their comfort level.
And I think too, it's one of the things that I realized when I was not getting a lot of, two-way engagement when I was speaking was I would just ask, are there any questions?
Right.
Well, what I also learned to do, and I think we've learned this, is ask people what they think.
Yeah.
Not just ask them if they have questions. Maybe they don't have a question.
Right.
And is that, what do you think about this information? Or, is there anything glaring here that might be missing? Or is there something here that is not clear? Like taking the time to go to be a little bit more thoughtful with how you're engaging with the team. And I think also what's really critically important when you're building these safe environments is when someone does speak up, when someone does ask or provide input, that you're celebrating that. And depending on the dynamic of the group that you're in, you might want to do that in that particular setting, or you might want to do it privately after the setting. There's you would have to gauge that depending on what was going on with the group. But I would say that this continues, and I think psychologically safe environments certainly have come to the forefront in the last, this is not a new trend.
Definitely big since the pandemic.
pandemic and quite frankly, you know, the racial unrest in our country created a lot of opportunity for people to be more aware. Right. But I also think, and while those things are still in our our reality, all of it, yes, those things are not. To me, that they're not rested in any way. No. In some ways, yes, maybe some ways, no. But the fact is that we should be caring about psychologically safe environments, even as it just relates to the everyday business.
Right.
So encouraging people to speak up is super important, and to be open and honest as leaders. Vulnerable. Yes.
You know, teaching the vulnerability piece of it. I'll give an example. I didn't even realize this was happening, that I was doing this, but. You've obviously taught me very well, but on Monday, we have a sales meeting every other Monday. And I invite everybody at the company can come to the sales meeting. Oh. I expect, you're invited.
Am I invited? Well,
yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Always.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not too early,
management is required. No, never too late. No, never too late. I always require managers to be there, but anybody who's not, you know, leading like literally the sales of business, I don't require, but I invite. A lot of people stay. Okay, they stay. And during these meetings, I'll show our Q1, Q2 projections, and I walk through them line by line. I tell them why the numbers look like that. I talk to them about what we need to be thinking about. And at the end of the meeting, I said, listen, I understand how it feels to look at this level of numbers, and which is really just arithmetic.
You meant detail.
Detail,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just arithmetic and organization. But if you don't get it, privately message me, please, and let's have a one-off, and let me walk you through it. Because if you're here, you care about it.
That's right.
And I don't care if you're a director at this company, which I would have had a little bit of a red flag, but or it doesn't matter who you are. Like if there's anything about this spreadsheet that wigs you out, please. And I did. I got requests for meeting. So that tells me. Psychologically, they're okay. They trust, thank God, they trust me and you to have a candid conversation about, Megan, I don't get it. Or what is this line item? Or how did you come up with all this?
Right.
You know, so.
Well, good. Because that tells me that we have a curious team, which is good, because this stuff is not, a lot of this stuff is not taught. So how are you going to learn? And, you know, I would say that the quicker we're able to teach our teams about the dynamics of the business, even the more complex, even if that may not be complex to you. Like, I don't find the numbers to be that complex, but I'm sure at one time
I was like,
I remember you struggling with it. And, and it was up to me to show you how to do it. And the way I teach is by
Get in it.
Like that's the way I learned. And so, but today we cannot afford to sit back and just give people the time to learn by, figuring stuff out. And Lord knows we don't want them to Google it or look up on TikTok.
And I guarantee
this is the way people are learning today.
You're right. All of you listening, it's the same.
Yeah.
You have people who don't know. You have people who are afraid to ask. Are you aware of that? And what are you going to do about it?
And I think the other thing is, not only do we want our people to develop their knowledge base of how the business actually works, certainly the work we do, the marketing piece, but how our business works, because when you do that, you're creating empathy. They understand a little bit more why it's important for whatever needs to happen, whatever the initiative is that you're working on. Like right now in our organization, if the initiative is to increase sales,
yes,
they should understand why that is. Why is that necessary? Explain that, and then help them to see here's how we're projecting that to happen, or here's how we intend to increase sales. Then the key ingredient is for them to see themselves in that initiative, goal, or objective, you fill in however you're presenting it. And I don't know how you do that. I mean, I know for myself, just figuring that out was the path forward for most of my career. But in order for us to grow organizations today with this workforce and with what is going on, we can't afford to sit back and wait. We need to be active teachers as leaders.
Right. And I know we need to move on to the next one, but I have had people tell me who have come to work at our company over the last 2 years when we have these one-offs, because this isn't the first time I've said, if you don't understand this, let me know privately and then we'll talk about it. I've had someone say to me, like, I've never had a leader, much less the president of the company, sit me down and help me understand this better. So thank you. I mean, I've had at least 2 people do that in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's very good.
I applaud you for taking the time to do that, because it's critical, I believe, in terms of, honestly, in terms of honing your culture.
Yeah.
And because I think that teaching and showing is a big part of a healthy culture.
Right.
All right, let's move on to trend number 3.
Okay. Understand what quiet quitting is and watch for signs. You said it earlier when you started about psychologically safe, and you said, you know, people kind of get lax. Like if people don't do anything, it can show up as quiet quitting, for example, but it doesn't always necessarily mean that. So let me explain what quiet quitting is. It's doing the minimum requirements of one's job and putting in no more time, effort, or enthusiasm than absolutely necessary. So as leaders, we're going to have to get more psychologically safe and connected with our teams in order to understand, is it because are they doing this because they are scared? That's one thing. Or are they doing this because they don't care anymore? Which is kind of quiet quitting.
Right.
And I'm just doing a job here and I'm just collecting my salary, but really, you know, I could leave it or take it.
Okay. Well, that's not new. We've experienced, unfortunately quiet, and maybe this term has been coined. I know it really came to the forefront during COVID, but I would say that it remains a trend, because usually the catalyst for quiet quitting happens for 2 reasons, based on our experience, is that something's happening externally in someone's life.
Right.
And it has drained them, it's stressed them, it's done something. So by the time they get to work, it's hard for them to really show up. What we know about that particular example is that can start and end. But if you don't identify it and you don't, you know, next thing you know, it can carry on for far too long. And maybe that person just needs some support.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And then the other example is like when someone just gets burned out. Yeah. They can get bored. We need to
talk about that too.
Yeah, we do. They can get burned out. They can get bored with the work. They can find themselves unhappy with the dynamic or the culture or the expectations of the organization. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. But yeah, when someone's just basically writing it in and showing up, doing the bare minimum and calling it a day, that is a culture killer because it compounds. Yes. And it's not that it can kill a culture in a day or a week, but over time, it ends up being an issue because people do notice it.
They do.
That's typically how we found out that it was happening in our organization. It wasn't necessarily our own observation. It was peer-to-peer observation. And so we now have ways that, and we can talk about that more in a second, ways that we keep a pulse on these things. So
yeah, there was a day, listeners, when
oh goodness,
somebody would be here at this company and we just, I don't know, I think it was we imagine people not having money to pay their rent or not pay the bills or whatever. And so we couldn't imagine what that would feel like, letting someone go who was giving up basically after multiple chances. Now it's not that way at all. No. You know, we have turned that thing on its ear to where we're overly potentially, how are you feeling? What are things, how, you know, every 3 months, like, how are you doing? Or every day for that matter. Let's have a weekly check-in. Let's have a pulse check-up. I mean,
and this is particularly if somebody, you know, is struggling.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So if you are feeling this, you know, you can either ignore it, which seems like the easy thing to do. Oh, he's going to get better. Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's not going to get better. What you have to do is shepherd this person into a healthy conversation about what's going to happen next, either by your direction or you loop back to that reshuffle.
Right.
What if there's another opportunity for you inside the business that's exciting to you?
Yeah, this is for someone who's kind of gone grown bored of what they're doing. Yeah.
Yes. You have to be part of the solution. Sometimes you're going to have to lead that conversation.
Yep. Agree.
And then number 4, you know, and this is kind of parlaying into what I just said, we have to get a handle on why people are quitting.
Yeah. And so the notion of this is kind of what's risen. There was the great resignation, and now we're dealing with the great application. And this is people for applying new jobs and not sticking with your company. And, you know, because there are available jobs, people are finding, and quite honestly, you know, the recruiting process out there through social media, it's a lot.
Easy.
It's easy. I mean, you can get, I'm getting offers for jobs on the regular.
Good luck.
Good luck. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, you know, now people are getting interested in what is out there. And so is the grass greener, the shiny objects. And so I think what's important about that is it's easier now than ever for people to choose another job. So that's understanding number 1 for leaders. And then, but what's most important is if you're experiencing people leaving, you have some attrition issues, people are leaving, then you want to find out why.
Yes.
Why? And sometimes it's just, I want to do something different, and that's okay.
That's okay.
But you want to know that that's coming in an organization. So I think it's important that we keep a pulse, even when things are seemingly okay. And to have a mechanism for doing that in our organization, we've mentioned this several times, we use a software called Tiny Pulse, and that it's anonymous, and you can ask questions like, are you thinking about leaving within the next year? And again, we've used it in our organization, and people know that they can trust it and they can answer honestly because they know that what we're trying to understand is the health of the organization is a sum of the individual health of each and every one of us. And when I say health, I mean not just like literal,
physical,
but but the mental and attitude towards their work and their company. And because what we've experienced as we've transitioned our culture to one that I would deem healthy is that people love it here, but that doesn't mean that they've not grown tired of what they're doing, or they are interested in finding what else is out there. And we want to be a company that invites people, if you're really wanting to go be a chef instead of a marketer, well, by all means, but let's have a conversation about it and let's work together for you to achieve your goals. I'd rather someone tell us they want to leave to go be whatever, than to keep that within. And then now you got the quiet quitting circumstance, and that's not reflective good on individuals or a company who can't see it. So we found this quote by Ian, I don't know how you say his last name, Schnorr. He's executive director of Financial Modeling Institute, says, if your team is unhappy, the business is in trouble. And that's where he encourages the engagement surveys and meetings with employees to take their professional temperatures and to assess how motivated and satisfied they are. And again, you know, we use an anonymous survey to do that, but then there's also weekly meetings, and there's also monthly meetings that we have here at the company called CTI meetings. And there we're our director of people, Hannah. And so we have multiple ways that we're seeking to check the pulse and temperature of people. And if you think you did it, we did a survey in January, and we talked to everybody individually in January. If you think for a minute that can't change by June, July, and certainly by the fourth quarter, you're being naive. Yeah. And believe me, we've been those leaders before that we said, we checked in, everybody's good, we just talked. Something can happen in a moment's notice externally that could change someone's mindset. So it's called pulse for a reason.
Yes.
Meaning it should be continuous.
That's right.
And you should find ways to do it on a regular basis. So
I had a conversation with a gentleman last year, a person in our, that we know in our industry. And we were having a conversation about, he was asking me not only about marketing, but about employee development and leadership. And I said, when was the last time you pulsed them? When was the last time your organization pulsed the entire company? And he said, we do that. We do that every 2 years. I didn't laugh.
No, I'm not
but
laughing.
on the inside,
I'm not laughing. I was gasping.
You responded exactly how I responded in my internal voice. She was like, what?
Yeah, your internal voice.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Right.
On the outside, I was like, okay, well, that's definitely a good first step. I would definitely talk to HR about you pulsing just your team even. Yeah. You know, it doesn't have to be company-wide. That was just a big revelation. I don't know that companies are even thinking about this.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think too, again, until you see it as being something that's valuable, it can seem soft and it can seem, well, people are going to just tell us what they want us to hear.
No.
You've got to get over those, you know, those assumptions.
Yes.
And if you want, to keep your people and to keep your culture, I'm assuming if you've worked to get it healthy, if you want to keep it in that status. So I think too.
How bad is it out there? Like,
I mean, you gave the stat at the beginning.
4 million a month last year, which
4 million a
equates
month.
To
over 40 million. That's
last year.
Left their jobs.
Yeah.
So let's think about that. Doesn't include terminations. I mean, and there's just a lot of volatility going on. That can be good if you're a healthy company and ready to hire people and have a good hiring process and those type of things, or it can be a little bit of a sign of a macro opportunity that you need to pay attention to because it's going to impact your business as it relates to hiring and in the workforce. So I think that that's important. And I think too, carrying over from the pandemic, people are still really thinking about their career aspirations and what they want to do with their lives. And they're taking risk on quitting and trying something new. And so that's not gone away. I had thought maybe that would slow down a little bit, especially 2 full years after it, but we're still dealing with, you know, some of that. And I don't know that that's going to go away. I think that might be here to stay. So as a trend, it continues. It's been around for a minute, but it continues. And I think it's important. And I also think it's important when we're talking about, you know, this particular notion of people quitting. I think there's a correlation between customer satisfaction and employee engagement. Yes. That's something that, you know, we have certainly seen. And when they're not correlating, if they're not moving in the same direction, and let's assume the positive direction, meaning customer satisfaction's on key, employee satisfaction's on key. If not, if they're not headed in the same direction, that's a red flag.
That's right. For business.
Oh, absolutely. And so
profits.
And the report that Meg said that we'll put in the show notes has some more information on this. But for instance, relative to that, rising customer satisfaction coupled with declining employee engagement could mean that staff members or teams feel overworked and are ready to quit. So the customers are happy, but the team is dissatisfied. Of course the
customers are happy.
Yeah, because we're over-delivering potentially.
Yes.
The reverse is that rising employee engagement, so people are happy, but customer satisfaction or that you have attrition with your customers, that could mean that that could mean that your organization is taking success for granted, potentially, and setting yourself up for failure in the future. So again, these trends are the reason why we share them is because, again, you can feel a bit isolated if something is happening in your company, but when you know that it's a common occurrence out there, you can look at it differently and look to find solutions potentially that other people have found, or at least start to look for yourself as to what could work for your organizations. And then also what I like about these particular trends and the reason why we're highlighting them is because it's things that you may not be thinking about at all.
No.
Until it hits you. And we want to help leaders out there get ahead of these things.
Yeah, don't be surprised.
Right.
I think that's really the thing about the trends is don't be surprised if one of these things happens or something completely different. The point is people are really still vacillating about where they're going to land in terms of what I really want to do, what I think I should be getting paid or whatever circumstances they're up against. What I wanted to mention, and we talk about this in our podcasts, how if you work for a big company versus a small company, obviously DMA, you know, we have at any given time anywhere from 15 to, right now we've been 16 employees for the last 2 years. Yay. All of that to say, if I work for a company where there's 10,000 employees, I don't think that makes you any less effective because I think you and I both have worked for very big companies before working at DMA, and you started the business. I felt paralysis around my ability to change things.
Because when you were at the big company.
At the big company. Whereas here, every decision we made, it was implemented, immediately. So it's very different. So those of you that are listening who work for a big corporation, I believe in my heart that business owners and leaders at the executive level at this point care about all the things that we're talking about today. And if you were to stick your neck out and ask for a meeting with someone who can sway ideas, policies, notions about human resources.
Make changes.
Yes, about all the things that we're talking about. Now is the time. You are not powerless. You, of course, approach would be very important, but I think people want to hear. This is the buzz around leadership is engagement. And so if you are seeking to engage, do it.
Agree.
Okay.
Yep. Well said.
All right. Let's talk about music.
Oh, we're going to make a transition.
Yes.
And we are going to put these trends in.
All these trends are going to be in the show notes along with the data to back them up.
Which is important, I think.
Yes.
Especially as it relates to topics like these. So,
yes.
Yay. Okay.
This is something we really wanted to do to help not only, like I said, Danelle and I do this all the time for ourselves, for our business, and we're now extending our research to you.
Absolutely.
Okay. So in terms of music, there's something in the headlines that I had to bring up because I don't even know. I know I texted you when this was happening.
You did.
Yeah. Miley Cyrus and Dolly Parton performed on New Year's Eve.
Well, yeah, it was a Miley show.
Yes.
And Dolly was a co-host performer.
Correct.
Which was so smart.
But the beautiful thing about it to me is not only that
The
dynamic duo, yes, but they sang Jolene and they sang Patsy Cline's Walking After Midnight together. And since they're making money
Of course.
on the singles. So I found some statistics on Billboard and they said both singles received a bump on streaming services the first week of January with a 29.6. So let's round it up to 30% increase in the US. That's up 1.7 million.
I did not know this.
Yes.
Yay for them.
Along with a 57% bump in digital sales the week ending January 5th, according to Luminate.
Wow.
Right?
Okay, so what this says is there's a correlation for live performance.
Yes.
Not that one was particularly live, but any type of performance, live or recorded, that ties into a huge audience.
Well,
well, I know, but think about how many listeners probably had never heard those two songs.
Okay.
Maybe they were just a fan of
Fair
Miley.
enough.
What if they were in their 20s and they're just a fan of Miley Cyrus and they maybe know who Dolly Parton is, but they don't know that song. And then Patsy Cline, like Walking After Midnight. When was the last time that was recorded or listen? I mean, people hearing that music.
It's a great song
know
for
it.
New Year's Eve, though.
Yeah, but
so cute.
I know, but we know it.
Yes.
Because of our age and my life.
Because of our
I'm not being rude. I'm being honest.
That was on in the car all the time.
Yes, well, and our upbringing is what I was going to say. So I'm not being rude about our upbringing or
our age.
Right. Thanks. But I love that. I guarantee you it would be so amazing if you could see the next level of statistics relative to the increase in listens or downloads or whatever they're calling it and digital sales if that was broken down by demographic. How fascinating that would be. I would think that would be a very interesting thing to see.
Well,
but
one would think if let's say it's Spotify or Apple Music, one would think that is targeting a larger demographic than others.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think if you think about the audiences that Miley brings to the table and that Dolly brings, there's a little bit of overlap, but mostly not. So smart. They have, by the way, Miley Cyrus is Dolly Parton's goddaughter. So for those of you who don't know that, you're like, why are the two of those together? Say they weren't connected on a personal level, it's still a brilliant
amazing
combo because you're spanning, I don't know, Miley's 30-something years old and Dolly's in her mid-70s.
Yes.
Still as relevant as ever.
Let's bring these two together.
And let's create an experience that's unique for people and different. And they were
Watch the sales soar.
It works. I mean,
what's the second lesson? You said there's a first lesson. What's the second lesson? I know.
Well, you know what the second lesson is. If you want anything to be amazing, invite Dolly Parton to the table. Which Dolly, hint, hint, this podcast could really use some of your sprinkle. I mean, we're very proud of our performance.
Oh, Dolly, please come on our podcast.
I know, just please.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, you would be not moving. Like you would just be sitting here staring at her.
Yes.
Because you couldn't speak.
No.
Like you're idle here. I could talk to her.
You could. Yeah, I would have I would have a problem.
Such good friends.
Yeah. I'd just be holding her hand.
I know. Petting it.
Petting it.
Oh,
Petting
Dolly,
it.
I've loved you forever.
Yeah.
You're my idol.
Anyway, I love to hear that. I knew we were both watching that special, and
look at them go.
And look at them go. I'm glad it's turned into something good for them because they both will do something good with that. So.
And they had fun.
Oh, it was a great show.
So fun, you know.
Great show, and I love that they invited so many new artists that are up and coming. I thought that was. They were the headliners, but they invited so much new talent. It was a great show.
Great show.
Yep.
And I think this one has been a great podcast.
Well, good. It's a little bit different, but I think it's very, very important to keep a pulse on what is happening out there so we feel less alone in our journeys and certainly keep ahead of things we may not see it coming.
That's right. Good Lord. Yes. I wish we would have had that advice years ago.
Yeah, me too. That's why we do this.
That's right. So don't forget, listeners, we're going to have lots of stuff in the show notes, including links to the reports that Danelle and I referred to today. Don't forget to tell a friend. 2023 is a year to tell a friend about this podcast. You can help somebody else. And before we go, we'll send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone. As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.